think we're live. Think we're live, folks. Let me see. Lord Jesus, that looks crazy. Yeah, okay. We're live. Cool. There's like a super delay. I wonder how much I'm competing with that audio. So that's beautiful. Not here to waste anybody's time. Yeah, we're doing that too. Sweet. Okay, where's my MP3? Yep. We're definitely going to pretend. Wait, I think I'm doing this wrong. I don't have a chat up here. What's wrong with me? Anyway, bruh. Yeah. We don't care. Cool. Anyway, gonna do this real quick. Don't care that it's late. Don't care that nobody's here. Do. Though I want somebody to come through. Guess what I typically do is.
Sorry, docs. Well, docs. There's two O's there, okay? There's two O's.
Go to my own channel and mute. Alright, anyway. The stream delay kills me, y'all. We're gonna go ahead and tab it. Tab. I need Serato. Gotta love the speed at which nothing's happening, right? Yep. Except, yep. Hmm. on something. Okay, nobody here, nobody doing nothing. Cool, cool, cool. We going back to what we were doing. I love the Inception. The Inception's killing me. Anyway, get out of here, guys. Put that down. Okay. Let's see if we can get a decent 4-bar loop out of this. Something like that. Let's just roll with it. Gotta let it bounce now. How now, brown cow? Need to pull that down to the other side, but yeah, okay. That's a nice foundation. We can start with that. According to this, now we're in E flat minor. Okay. Let me turn the gain up on the microphone so I don't be so close. Didn't mean this. Hold up. Sloppy, y'all. My bad. What we That's crazy move. Ives a smart person. That only took 8 years. Alright, we got a little something something. Is there more to get from this sample? Let's see. not even record armed. What in the actual H baskets? Nope, that ain't it either, Chief. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold the phone. Compressor. Just on the side chain. Can I just do that? From the kick joint. Yeah, not my finest hour. Let's go ahead and record arm solo. Do this on this too, and I should have let it finish. Gotta let it finish. That's insane work. Save it as. Nope. Go to my. Save it as this. Severance. But we'll do a different version in Logic sometime later this week. Maybe I'll hop back on this thing tomorrow. But yeah, let's just go ahead and call it Severance Flip for right now. nothing there. There's nothing there. We're good. We're good. We're good. I got scared. All right. Might as well. Whatever. I do want to open that though. I don't remember what it sounds like. I don't know where that's at. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Subjectively bad. I hate that right now. Maybe that's a no. Maybe that's a no on what I was trying to do. Maybe. So that's crazy. Anywho, did I make anything good in Ableton? Nah. With all my no folks here, what I'm gonna do is clearly strictly for the memes at this point. But I'm gonna read. I'm gonna start a series called Jay Reads, and I have a book here that called Pim. Pim is the name of this book. So let me go to this. Haha. Right? And let's see what we got, right? So what I'll read is the little insert, the inlay. Here it goes again. The name of the book is Pim. Recently canned professor of American literature, Chris Janes, is obsessed with the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, Edgar Allan Poe's strange and only novel. When he discovers the manuscript of a crude slave narrative that seems to confirm the reality of Poe's fiction, he resolves to seek out Salal, the remote island of pure and utter blackness that Poe describes with horror. Janes imagines it to be the last untouched bastion of the African diaspora and the key to his personal salvation. He convenes an all-black crew of 6 to follow Pym's trail to the South Pole in search of adventure, natural resources to exploit, and for Janes at least, the mythical world of the novel. With little but the first-hand account from which Poe derived his seafaring tale, a bag of bones and a stash of Little Debbie snack cakes, Janes embarks on an epic journey under the permafrost of Antarctica, beneath the surface of American history and behind one of literature's great mysteries. Here be monsters. All right? This is by Matt Johnson, M-A-T. No 2 T's, just M-A-T. right, here's the preface, right? Upon my return to the United States a few months ago, after the extraordinary series of adventures in the South Seas and elsewhere, which you can read about on the pages that follow, I found myself in the company of several gentlemen in Richmond, Virginia. Richmond? Who were deeply interested in the regions I had visited, and who were constantly urging it upon me as a duty to give my narrative to the public. Yet here are our intentions. Here our inten- Yet here our intentions diverge. At a crossroads, travelers may meet, then move on in different, at times opposing directions. For sociological and historical purposes, they wanted me to tell my story, to enlighten them about my experience. I had several reasons, however, for declining this request, some of which concerned me alone, others less so. One issue which gave me pause was that since I took no pictures or recordings of consequence and barely cracked my laptop during the greater portion of my time in question, I might not be able to write solemnly from memory an account so airtight and accurate as to leave no doubt of its truth. Another reason was that the incidents be retold were admittedly so outrageous that, without having proof, except a single corpse who was left in a drunken 200-year-old pickle, I could only hope for the trust of my audience, and specifically those of my past associates who have had reason over the years to have faith in my sincerity. I knew the chances were that the public at large would regard what I will now attempt to tell as little more than a rant of paranoid. Sorry, I will now attempt to tell as a little more than a rant of paranoid. Adding to this, I must admit an insecurity in my own abilities as a writer. This this was one of the principal causes that prevented me from complying with the suggestions of my advisors sooner. Among the brothers outside Virginia who expressed the greatest interest in my story, or really the part which related to my experiences in the Antarctic region, was Mr. Johnson, at the time an assistant professor of language and literature at Bard College, a historically white institution in the town of Annandale, along the Hudson River. Hey, Annandale, I know exactly where that is. He strongly advised me, to the point of discomfort, to prepare at once a full record of what happened, and trust to the shrewdness and common sense of the folks to figure it out. To place it in non threatening story form for those who, even if they don't believe my story, would be willing to still take a bite and try to swallow it nonetheless. It was also Mr. Johnson's decision to present these revelations under the guise of fiction, and with this strategy, I agree. For one, doing so provides a level of synchronicity with the seminal text that began my journey. Also, keeps me from being sued by the Cola Corporation, and not being sued is always a good thing. And there are more ephemeral motivations as well. In this age, when reality is built on big lies, what better place for truth than fiction? This expose made this expose being made, it will be obvious to those who would compare the few works of Mr. Johnson where his brief assistance in this narrative begins and ends. Regardless, it should be emphasized that I have approved the following manuscript in thought, intent, and theory. I claim it as my own. C. Janes, Philadelphia, January 19th, 2009. Now, that preface is from the protagonist, whose name is Mr. James, not from the author of the book, Matt Johnson, okay? Just so we're clear. All right, chapter one. Always thought if I didn't get tenure, I would shoot myself or strap a bomb to my chest and walk into the faculty cafeteria. But when it happened, I just got bourbon drunk and cried a lot and rolled into a ball on my office floor. A couple days of this and I couldn't take it, so I ended classes a week early and checked into the Aquaba bed and breakfast in Harlem to be among my own race and party away the pain. But mostly I just found myself back in the same ball some more, still on the floor, just a more historically resonant address. My buddy Garth Frierson, he'd been laid off about 6 months before and was nice enough to drive all the way from Detroit to help a childhood friend. This help mostly consisted of him sitting his bus drivers. Hold on. This help mostly consisted of him sitting his bus driver ass on my rented bed, busting on me until I had enough shame to get off my own duff and try to make something of myself again. By then, the term was over, graduation done, campus vacant. I didn't want to see anybody. The only things worse than the ones who were happy about my dismissal were the ones that weren't. The sympathy, the condolences. It was all so white. I was the only black male professor on campus, professor of African American literature, professional Negro. Over the years since my original hire, I pushed away from that and insisted on teaching American literature in general, following a path toward my passion, toward Edgar Allan Poe. Specifically, I offered the course Dancing with the Darkies, Whiteness in the Literary Mind, twice a year, regardless of enrollment. In regard to the number of students who chose to attend the seminar, I must say, in my defense, that the greatest ideas are often presented to empty chairs. However, a different theory on proper class size was cited in my denial letter from the president and given as a reason to overturn the faculty's approval. Curing America's racial pathology couldn't be done with good intentions or presidential elections. Like all diseases, it had to be analyzed at a microscopic level. What I discovered during my studies in Poe's and other early Americans' texts was the intellectual source of racial whiteness. Here, in these pages, was the very fossil record of how this odd and illogical sickness formed. Here was the twisted, mythic underpinnings of modern racial thought that could never before be dismantled because we were standing on them. You don't cure an illness by ignoring it or just fighting the symptoms. A Kleenex has never eradicated a cold. I was doing essential work, work affecting domestic policy, foreign policy, the entire social fabric of the most powerful nation of the world. Work that related directly to the way we lived our daily lives and perceived reality itself. Who cared if a bunch of overprivileged 19-year-olds with questionable hygiene could be bothered to rise for the 8 a.m. class? Who cared if I chose to not waste even more precious research time attending the Toothless Diversity Committee? Just get your books, dog, and get out of there. Pack up your place. Focus on what you can do. You want, you can come back with me to Detroit. It's cheap. I got a big crib. Ain't no jobs, but still. Garth and I drove up the Taconic in the rain. So Garth and I drove up the drove up the Taconic in the rain. I was still drunk, and the wet road was like lines on a snake's back, and my stomach was going to spill. Even drunk, I knew any escape plan that involved going to Detroit, Michigan was a harbinger of doom. Garth Frierson was my boy from when we were boys, from when I lived in the basement apartment in Philly and he lived over the laundromat next door. Garth didn't even ask how many books I had, but he must have suspected, because I had books. I had books like a lit professor has books. And then I had more books, finer books, first editions, rare prints, copies signed by hands long dead. Angela walked out on me a long time ago, and my chance of children walked with her, but I had multiplied in my own way. I'd had shelves built in my office for these books, shelves 10 feet tall and completely lined in the drywall. The campus was dead, a vacant compound hidden from the road by darkness and hulking pines. The gravel parking lot was empty, but I made Garth park in the spot that said President. Violators will be towed on principle. When you get denied tenure at a college like this, intimate, good but not great, your career is over. A decade of job preparation and no one else will hire you. If you haven't published enough, people assume tenure denial means you never will. If you have published and were still denied, people assume you're an asshole. Nobody wants to give a job for life to an asshole. And they didn't have to in this economy. Outside of a miracle, after denial, I would be lucky enough to scrounge up adjunct teaching at a community college somewhere cold, barren, and far from the ocean. A life of little health insurance, bill collector calls, and classrooms with metal detectors, all compliments of this college president, Mr. Bowtie. The least I could do was sorry y'all, I don't really swear, so that's why I said ass so weird, but the least I could do was shit in his space for an hour. We trudged. The building looked like an old church that lost his faith. I'm gonna get better at this. That's why we doing it now. We doing it live. Screw it, we'll do it live. All right. We trudged. The building looked like an old church that had lost its faith. Every step up the stairs a sacrilege. Garth huffed, but followed. I'd chosen an office in the back of the top floor to dissuade students, but my lectures had done a better job of this. My office was a narrow A-frame cathedral with a matching window, a shrine to the books that line the walls in my own solitude. Bro, I'm not gonna lie to you. I got a lot of books in here, I said, letting him in first. You do? Garth asked me, because I didn't. It was empty. I should have been greeted with hundreds of colored spines of literary loves, but there was nothing. My books were gone. My office had been cleared out. Everything was gone. My pictures, my lamp, my Persian rug, everything not school property or nailed down, gone. A chasm of vacant whitewashed bookshelves opened up before me. I was breathless. Garth was out of breath, but for him, it was just all the stairs. They took my shit, man. They took my shit. I kept repeating. I walked over to the desk and pulled out all the drawers. There were some chewed yellow pencils left, and a few folded post-its and bent paper clips. But that's not what I was looking for. I kept searching, desperate, sliding pencils and papers around, looking for more. Damn, dog. You didn't have no porn in there, did you? Garth already had his little Debbie out and was chewing on it like it was his reward for making it up 3 floors of 19th century stairs. Just a picture, I told him. A picture of what? Angela, I admitted. Worse, Garth said, head wagging. I slammed the drawer shut, and it was loud. And I liked that sound, a moment of violence, but this time coming from me. So then I started banging on the empty shelves with my fists, and they vibrated. You could hear the echo in the room. Then bouncing off into the empty building beyond us, Garth closed the door. That's wrong, man. Disrespectful. Forget them. Job's over. That's life. What you gonna do? I was going to show up to the president's house and kick his ass, it occurred to me. This act suddenly seemed like the only thing worth running away to Detroit for. I didn't tell Garth this because he would have stopped me. He was big enough to fill up the door. He was even bigger since he'd been laid off. I remember when this man was skinny, ran track, ran it poorly, but still. It was depressing looking at every extra pound on him, each a reminder that we were both moving swiftly into decline with little else as accomplishment. You're a professor. How are you not accomplished? Wait in the car, man. I just have to check my mail, I told him. Garth did it. I'm a bad liar, but he was tired and it was really cold outside. And brothers don't like the cold. It was late spring, but it had been raining for a week, and upstate New York was frigid in a way which was more gothic and empiric than the Philly chill we'd grown up with. You drunk. I'm tired as all hell. The sooner you get your ass out of here, the sooner you get your ass out of here. Garth Garth offered, but he left. So then I walked over to the president's house to punch him and maybe kick him a few times too. In my head, I was getting gangster, which I've always felt showed greater intent than getting gangster in that it expresses a willful unlawfulness even upon its own linguistic representation. Sorry, first time he said, in my head, I was getting gangster, which I've always felt showed greater intent than getting gangster, in that it expresses a willful unlawfulness even upon its own linguistic representation. I was going to show him how we do where I'm from, go straight Philly on him. And I knew all about that, although I had never actually punched someone in the face before. As a child myself, had been on the receiving end of that act several times and was a quick study. The president's house was at the other end of the campus, but it was a small liberal arts campus. An empty space, dorms and buildings deserted, solar street lamps popping on and off for just me, while I was walking, stoking my anger, thinking of all the work I'd done and all that security I was now being denied. I came to the administration building, and I saw that there was a light on. Downstairs in the back in the president's office, no one just left interior lights on. The environmental footprint too massive, the cost too high, and with every attack, the prices went even higher. So he was in there. The outside door opened, and I knew he was in there. And then there was this overwhelming emotion. It was not rage or anger, it was something even more illicit, unwanted. It was hope. Here we are, two men alone. Society vacated, and now just two men and a problem. One that somehow, in my stupor, seemed workable. There was a guy down the hall, a romanticist, who had been denied tenure 10 years ago, approved by the faculty committee, just as I was, only to be shot down by the same president in the same manner. And he had, in his grief, approached the all powerful boss man, and he had repented all of his sins, real and imagined, and was granted a permanent teaching gig. It made sense, too, for as Frederick Douglass's narrative tells us, it was more valuable to a master to have a morally broken slave than to have a confident one. That romanticist story had always seemed humiliating to me before this moment, but suddenly it became inspirational. At the president's door, I paused, prepared myself for what could be simply the final test before I overcame my troubles. I took a deep breath to prepare for the performance of dignified groveling. Then I heard the music coming from inside. What I saw scared me, took me out of my confidence, my momentum. What do you make of a Jew sitting in the dark listening to Wagner in this day and age? I could think of no more call to the end of the world than the one I was looking at. Random violence on the news had become background noise to me at that point. But this scene genuinely scared my ass. Still in his bow tie and tweed jacket at this time of night. It was disgusting. He hit his keyboard quickly, and suddenly the sound became Mahler. But I knew. I knew what I'd heard. As the sound cleansed the room, the bald man just looked at me, drink in hand. As drunk as I was, I could still smell the sweet singe of alcohol hanging in the air. My shit, it came out. It lacked the eloquence of a planned rebuttal, but he understood. Packed by the movers, delivered to your listed residence. A thank you, really, for your service. Thank you. He said the last bit as if he should be saying this to him. Oh, he said this last bit as if I should be saying this to him, but still it robbed me of a bit of my momentum. I had been surviving on righteous indignation and self pity for weeks. I realized once the supplies seemed threatened, I realized once the supply seemed threatened, but then I remembered I'd been canned and my fuel line kicked in once more. Is it because I refused to be on the diversity committee? I demanded. I was loud, the halls were empty, the echo enhanced my argument. Well, that certainly would have, he began, but seeing that I was hearing every word, already planning my deposition for my discrimination lawsuit, he stopped himself. Your file was examined as a whole. You were hired to teach African American literature, not just American literature. You fought that. Simple. So you want the black guy to just teach black books to the white kids. We have a large literature faculty. They can handle the majority of literature. You were retained to purvey the minority perspective. I see nothing wrong with that, he shrugged. Poured a second drink in a second glass and pushed it forward to me with the base of the bottle. Let's see. You have the academics going off the farm all the time. Yeats scholars who end up following their way to Proust. You have a film professor who was hired as a German linguist. A Guggenheim, a Fulbright, and a Rhodes Scholar. Mr. Janes, you have accomplished no such honor or distinction. I do not mean that as an insult, just an unfortunate reality. A big part of me hurt a lot hearing this said out loud. In a big way, I blushed. And as pale as I was, I blushed possibly as no black man had done before me. Staring at him, I settled myself, staring at his bastard tie. Look at it. The bow tie was hypnotizing. Usually men of power have useless fabric tied around their necks, but this was smaller and tied at a different angle. No big phallic thing for this guy. No, it was even worse. It was, look at me, I have a itty bitty microphallic tie around my neck, and yet I still have all the power over you, all this power over you. Please listen to me, I pleaded. My work, it's about finding the answer to why we have failed to truly become a post-racial society. It's about finding the cure. 1,000 Baldwin and Ellison essays can't do this. You have to go to the source. That's why I started focusing on Poe. If we can identify how the pathology of whiteness was constructed, then we can learn how to dismantle it. The work I'm doing, it's just books, sure, but it's important, essential research. You're going to fire me for refusing to sit on the campus diversity committee? You could have compensated for your lack of national presidents by embracing our role locally. But alas, he told me, and looked away. Everyone has a role to play. I put my hand out to him, and before he could meet my palm with his own, I reached higher and grabbed the tie on his neck. It was a clip on and came off easily. Barely shook him when I yanked it off in my fist. I was right about it being his power source. He was totally quiet after it was taken from him. I didn't hear a peep behind me as I ran from the confrontation. He snatched and stole the tie. That's crazy. When I got to the car, I told Garth that my academic career was probably over, but since I'd been saying the same thing for a couple of days, he just tuned me out as he tuned in the radio. Take me to this place before we go. It was done at a park about 2 miles from your house. I already Googled it, he said, reaching across me to get into the glove compartment. Garth pulled out the print of a painting, all scrolled up, and dropped it in my lap. I unraveled it and saw a syrupy sweet landscape of the Catskills, the kind of vista painted on how to shows in half an hour. The kind of painting Garth adored, done by that artist he idolized. It's called Stock of the Woods, he said. It's a Thomas Carvel Hudson Valley School edition, a tribute to the painters they used to have here. I have an original signed print. That's part of my nest egg. And you're there laughing at it. Look at it. Really look at it. You need to. Don't it make you all peaceful just looking into that world? Looks like the view up a Care Bear's ass. I got stress. Garth turned and started yelling at me. His tree air fresheners dancing over the dashboard from the wind. I got no type of job. I got no savings. The whole world's hell. The world is pollution and terrorism and warming and whatever. I don't know, whatever gets dropped next. I drive a bus, or I used to. I'm a 38-year-old man who drives a bus, and I ain't even got that now. I got stress. Garth pushed past me to get another little Debbie snack cake from the box beneath my legs, and I calmed down eating it. Calmed down eating it. He calmed down, Garth. My man, you're like a home experiment in type 2 diabetes. Your picture, it's real nice, okay? And I'll take you wherever, but you need to calm the hell down, I told him. And he did. So, we took the road we took to the road the last few miles to my home. He was stressed. I understood. I understood even before we got to my house and saw all my books sitting there on the front porch. Not in boxes, just stacked there. Hundreds of them. My books, my treasure, sitting in the rain, bloated with a week's worth of water and dirt and mold. Pages bursting open like they were screaming. Some lugnut from the physical plant had just left them there and driven off again. Tens of thousands of dollars, years of collecting, destroyed, irreplaceable gifts, inscriptions, ruined. I picked one up, threw it down, started screaming, jumping. When I finished, Garth held out one of his little Debbie cakes to me, cellophane already pulled back for convenience, poking closer and closer to my face till I took it from him. Come on, take a bite of the white girl. It will make you feel good. I'm going back to campus. I'm going back to campus and I'm going to get that bastard. Damn, dog. You already got his bow tie. Garth is out here spitting facts. I went to the bar. Garth was tired from driving, so he stayed back. On the way, I made a call to my lawyer, and one hopefully to my antiquarian as well. The latter told me he had something special, something signed, first edition, and I caught myself almost smiling in response. Life would move on, I tried to remind myself. Presumably, it would take me with it. There was one bar in town, and there was one black guy sitting in it. And this I took as a divine miracle, maybe even another sign of my impending turn of fortune. It was a town of only 1,163, just 8 miles north of the campus. Aside from a handful of students during term, there were no black people in the area. In the summer tourism months, on occasion you could spot a black woman with her white partner passing through, but often these visitors were particularly disinclined to co-ethnic. Excuse me. In the summer tourism months, on occasion you could spot a black woman with her white partner passing through, but often these visitors were particularly disinclined to co-ethnic bonding. This brother wasn't though. When I walked in, he looked up and smiled at me like he knew me, and I gave him the nigga nod, and he hit me right back, so I knew we were cool. I sat down next to him. Mosaic Johnson, hip hop theorist. Of course he was an academic. Of course I was. There was no other reason for two obviously educated black men to be there. And it was obvious, even of him, dressed as he was in his carefully selected baggy jeans, hat to the side, and other matching oversized pop culture juvenilia. But he was a professor of music, so allowances could be made for the styling. Chris James, Americanist, and our fist bumped in the blackademic bliss. Mr. Johnson was a younger man than I in both years and manner, dressed like he was straight out of Compton, but clearly straight out of a postdoc instead. Just arrived in town to start teaching the following term, coming in the summer because his lease in Chicago was up and this was his future. Eager, earnest. Through drunken eyes, I looked at Mosaic Johnson and I saw myself there. I saw myself showing up in this town, seeing it as a foreign territory. I was hopeful to invade. 21 years of academic training culminating in permanent entrenchment on the business side of the classroom. Theory finally turned into practice, and practice of yapping about theory. Just like me, I wept for this bastard. Don't join the diversity committee, I told him when the third round hit. We'd been talking well for a minute, mostly me bemoaning the history of Dutch slavery in the area, but he hung with me. A squat dude whose only thinness was his mustache. Mosaic seemed to roll a bit away from me when I said this, but I leaned closer because he needed to hear it. These historically white institutions, they get the one black professor, they put him or her on something they call the diversity committee. Don't let them put you there. It's a slave hold. They'll fight you. They'll really want they'll really want you on the diversity committee because if there aren't any minorities on the committee isn't diverse. Man, in my work, I deal with the ghetto, the real shit. You know what I'm saying? Reality, he told me, motioning around the room with a silver ringed hand as if our present setting was mere computer simulation. I'm not trying to run from the folks. I want to be on that committee. I'm a fighter. I want to be on that committee to bring the fight here. The hand in the air formed into a fist. I looked around the room at the 20 or so white liberals him on taking him in on the sly. They loved it. They loved that fist. If I was still here tomorrow, they would come up to me and ask why I never raised a black power fist like this new guy. Undaunted, I continued. No, you don't, and I'll tell you why. The diversity committee has one primary purpose, so that the school can say it has a diversity committee. They need that for when students get upset about race issues or general ethnic stuff. It allows the faculty and administration to point to it and go, everything's going to be okay. We have formed a committee. People find that very relaxing. It's sort of like if you had a fire and instead of putting it out, you formed a fire committee, but none of the ideas that come out of all that committeeing will ever be implemented. See, nothing the, nothing the committee has suggested in 30 years has ever been funded. It's a gerbil wheel meant to keep this nigga boy running. Ellison, he smiled. I knew a black author reference would get to him. Now the cat was straight hip hop, he continued. I would have corrected the hip to be, but what's the difference of black American musical traditions amongst kin? Chris James, you know, I've read some of your early work, your Ellison theory. That had the beat. Why don't you bring it like that no more, he asked me. And I glowed at this. Old musicians asked to play their classic songs, they must get this feeling. You're tired of it, sure, but at least somebody cares. I thanked him, told him how I've been drawn toward 19th century fiction, Edgar Allan Poe. As I'm getting up to hit the John, right as I turned away, Mosaic Johnson says, "Man, nobody cares about that Poe thing." And I laughed back at him and told him thanks for getting my pain in moments I was off to pissing. In the can, standing in front of the urinal, I was still for the moment. It felt like it was the first time I was truly still since the whole disaster had started. Even when I was pulled into a ball on the floor, I was rocking and reeling internally. But this bathroom, this empty bathroom, it was like a temple, utterly serene. And within that silence, clarity came to me. I started thinking about my past and my new friend. And I started to think about everything he said and all of his responses. And I was surprised to find a previously undetected negative tone there. Not in his words, but in the little performances in his demeanor. His last statement being the irrefutable proof of this. "You're not in the music department, are you?" I said to him on my return. I didn't even sit down. I was standing. I was shaking. My voice was cracking a little bit too, which was beyond my control. "No, I am not. My instrument is the QWERTY keyboard," he admitted, took the last swig from his Hennessy, and then swiveled to face me. "You're here to replace me, aren't you?" What took my man so long to realize that a black man coming into the one school was going to replace him? Anyway, man, just relax. Ain't nothing personal. Yes, I'm the new hire. Yes, it was your tenure line. I never said I was music prof. I said I was a hip hop theorist, okay? That's my school of literary criticism, right? I'm here to bring the heat to the text. That's it. It's all good, and hell yes, I will represent myself as the strong black man I am on this campus. Right, you're here to be on the diversity committee. Look, cuz, unlike you, clearly I believe in trying to change things, fighting against racism where I see it. I don't back down, and I don't apologize for that either. Hell yeah, I'm down for the damn committee. I'm down for the fight. You know what I'm saying? A PhD can't manage a lot of minutes, but we are good at reading between the lines. I knew exactly what he meant. No footnotes needed. Still, I stepped in closer. You know what I think? I think that when you fight the same battles with the same tactics, you don't get any further. That unless you address the roots of the problem, it will continue to grow. This was fairly eloquent for me, given that it was off the cuff, no peer review or rewrites, and I was proud that I had thought of it there and not later via les man, I can't speak French, y'all. L'esprit de l'escalier. It was the arrogance brought on by this success that made me pause 2 steps into my exit, turn, and continue. And the white folks here know that, and they like it that way. You're hired to be the angry black guy, get it? You're not fighting whiteness, you're feeding this perversion. You're here so you can assuage their guilt without making them actually change a damn thing. They want you to be the diversity committee, because every village needs a fool. Still, I felt I was sticking to my thesis closely, not diverting off into too much bullshit. If Mosaic Johnson had kept his mushy buttocks on the stool instead of getting in my face, then it would have made a decent closer. Oh, I get it. I get it now. Why you love Poe. You two share one big thing in common. Neither one of you is a damn bit relevant anymore. This college can really use you, I returned, preparing myself to hoof it. Every good zoo needs a caged gorilla. It was an inflammatory statement. I lit that shit on fire too, just to watch him burn. Even I was offended, to tell the truth, and that's why I chose that level of toxic phraseology to hit him. He hit me back though, fist in the gut, and then, when I went down to the floor, in several other places. Mosaic Johnson could definitely bring the beat. To me personally, he brought the beat down. Poe doesn't matter, he said as he pummeled me. I respected him for that, though he guessed correctly his weak suburban mini mall kung fu punches might not be enough to hurt me. Tekeleli, I laughed as the crowd pushed Mosaic Johnson from my body. Tekeleli. All right, that was the end of chapter 1. That is going to be the end of the stream. We're going to start to get better at this as we move on. Thanks, guys. Peace.